Is this going to be different for Trump? Will he negotiate? Will Democrats come out on top? Are the cameras going to be there? Are they not? How is Jeffries going to respond? This is his first ever sit down with Trump. That's a lot to ponder, to consider, given the fact that we're going to be just days away from a government shutdown. Good morning, I'm Anna Palmer, and welcome to the Daily Punch, brought to you by Punchbowl News. It's Tuesday, September 23rd, 2025. Let's get into the mix. Here are your Washington headlines of the day. Number one, 3 funding moments to watch. Number 2, Kansas enters the redistricting chat. And number 3, American Action Network launches an ad buy focused on the One Big Beautiful Bill. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Hope you all are having a great week. Want to talk about government funding. We are finally officially 1 week out from the government shutting down, and there are some really interesting dynamics that are at play here in Washington as both Democrats and Republicans are basically cementing their position at this point about where they are when it comes to government funding. We are not seeing any budging right now when it comes to negotiating or when it comes to kind of softening of positions. It is really something to watch. And I think one of the things we're breaking down in this morning's edition is the idea of kind of 3 things we are watching really, really closely. Number 1, Trump versus the Democrats. We scooped yesterday that President Donald Trump would meet with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries on Thursday. This is a massive meeting. Both the Democrats, the 2 Democratic leaders, have been pushing publicly, privately, to have a meeting with the president. They hadn't been any kind of communication. Typically, in these negotiations, the 4 corners or the leaders would all meet with the president and try to figure out if there's a pathway forward. That has not been something that has been done. But the Democrats, we had Chuck Schumer on Flyout Day last Thursday, and he basically was saying, how important it was for the leaders to meet, that was a step that needed to happen in order for them to kind of decide to start hashing things out. They want to negotiate, Schumer said. This is something they've been demanding, and now we're going to have to see what's the outcome here. Well, both sides, this is a high-stakes meeting. If you guys remember, Trump's disastrous 2018 sit-down with Schumer and then Speaker Nancy Pelosi. This was the one that memes were made of. As she walked out in the orange jacket and sunglasses. Is this going to be different for Trump? Will he negotiate? Will Democrats come out on top? Are the cameras going to be there? Are they not? How is Jeffries going to respond? This is his first ever sit down with Trump. That's a lot to ponder, to consider, particularly given the fact that we're going to be just days away from a government shutdown. The stakes are extremely high. Federal agencies shut down on October 1st if a deal isn't reached. Republicans, now let's just talk about where we're at. Republicans offering a clean continuing resolution to November 21st, a proposal that allows GOP and Democratic appropriators to continue negotiating on a broad fiscal year 2026 spending deal, while, of course, the Democrats have countered with a very different offer of their own, an October 31st CR that includes a permanent extension of Obamacare premium tax credits, a reversal of the GOP's One Big Beautiful Bill's massive Medicaid cuts, an end to the billions of dollars in unilateral spending rescissions by the White House, and restoration of public broadcasting funds that Democrats have eliminated. The cost of this Democratic package is $1 trillion plus. Hard to see all of those things riding on a short-term CR, but it does showcase where the Democrats' focus is when it comes to trying to start a negotiation. Of course, there's no way that Trump and congressional Republican leaders are going to accept Democrats' offer, although a number of moderate House and Senate Republicans would go along with an Obamacare subsidies extension. There's a lot of nervousness, as we've talked about on this podcast, about what is going to happen for Republicans once these notices start going out, what impact that could have on the midterms. The House has already passed the Republicans' November 21st CR. Senate Democrats blocked it, only to have Senate Republicans then block the Democrats' plan. A little tit for tat there. Thune can force another vote on the GOP CR proposal before a shutdown starts, and we expect him to do that. Thune could do this multiple times, right? Try to make this as hard as possible for Democrats to keep showing that, hey, the Republicans are the responsible party here. Republicans are convinced that they have a far stronger hand than in any previous shutdown. Most Republicans don't even think Schumer and Jeffries deserve a meeting and should simply accept the House GOP's CR. Trump and OMB Director Russ Vought have wide discretion over how painful a shutdown will be. Trump can keep hundreds of thousands of federal workers on the job, even if they're not getting paid, or he can close down huge swaths of government in order to maximize the pain of the American public and, by extension, Democrats. He can mix and match at will, and we don't yet have quite an understanding of what exactly are they going to do, right? How can they not only use the bully pulpit of cable news, but also the ability of the presidency to kind of really force the hand of Democrats when it comes to who is actually going to get paid and how painful it is. This is an uncomfortable position for Democrats. And Trump knows it, and he's going to try to make this as difficult as possible for them if we do end up in a shutdown. Let's talk about the number two thing we are watching this morning, the politics of the House coming back. So this has been really interesting, right? We scooped Monday that Jeffries has told his members to be prepared to come back to D.C. on September 29th, even though the House is out. So why are Democrats doing this, right? And it's important because optics matter in a shutdown. Are you in Washington trying to do the business of the country, trying to get, taking this as seriously as possible? Or are you back home, kind of hanging out and seeing what's going to happen from your district? And I think the optics that Jeffries is trying to force is the idea that Democrats are in Washington trying to get a deal done while House Republicans are back home. Johnson and House GOP leaders have announced that they won't bring the House back until at least October 1st. In other words, after a shutdown has started. So we have expressed our skepticism of this strategy in Monday's AM edition, only to hear complaints from Republicans. Yet, as we noted, Jeffries and dozens of House Democrats will be in town starting Wednesday for the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's annual legislative meeting. Let's just look at this. It's important to kind of think about history in the context of all of these things, right? Because if you look back at the 2013 shutdown, the last full government shutdown, the GOP-run House was in session and voting 15 of the last 16 days the shutdown covered, including the day it began. It was different during the 2018-2019 partial shutdown, but that was post-election, and Democrats had already won a big House margin, and a huge chunk of the shutdown was during the Christmas holiday season. We're going to have to see how Johnson plays this. Huge stakes for him because Republicans want to be taken seriously here, want to be seen as the sober acting party, the one that has is not bringing politics into play here, is saying we are just doing that clean CR. We're ready to keep the government open, keep working on this government funding issue. Optics really matter here. And let's talk about the third thing that we're watching, potential off-ramps. We've noted that there's no way that Trump or Hill Republicans can accept the Democratic CR proposal, but big question is there any chance for Republicans to do a deal, especially on Obamacare subsidies? We've told you before that some vulnerable House GOP moderates want a one-year extension. Some Senate Republicans are pushing for this too. Neither effort is Republican leadership sanctioned. So can a deal happen? Not on a 7-week CR, according to Hill Republicans, but Trump could push Hill Republicans for a 2-year extension as part of a fiscal year 2026 funding deal. And we've seen time and again that Trump will do whatever he wants and that Republicans will typically fall in line. For now, Republicans remain convinced that Democrats, especially Schumer, will fold. If not before a shutdown starts, then shortly thereafter. We are watching all of this very closely and would be remiss if I did not add that on Thursday, we will have Senate Minority Leader Mr. Jeffries on flyout day as our guest. There is going to be a lot to talk about. All right, let's go to the number 2 story of the morning. Kansas Republicans prepare to move on redistricting. We've got some news here by our very own Allie Mutnick, who is crushing the politics beat for Punchbowl News, in particular redistricting. The news is Republicans in the Kansas legislature are planning to petition to call themselves into a special session on redistricting, circumventing Democratic Governor Laura Kelly. An announcement could happen soon per sources with knowledge of the plan. Now, this special session would be the beginning of a very lengthy process to try and draw Democratic Representative Sharice Davids out of her Kansas City-based district. The push, which comes amid White House pressure, is the newest front in the nationwide redistricting wars. Republicans can force the governor to call a special session if a supermajority of lawmakers sign onto a petition. The Kansas legislature has a GOP supermajority in both chambers. So that's a tough task. But if Republican leaders in the Kansas House and Senate are ready to gather signatures, they likely believe they have the necessary buy-in from their caucuses. State Senate President Ty Masterson, a Republican who's currently running for governor, has been publicly supportive of redistricting. And the Kansas legislature has only successfully forced a special session once. That was in 2021. Republicans can pass a new congressional map, but they will again need a supermajority to override Kelly's likely veto. This, of course, is just the latest state that we are watching very closely as Republicans try to march across states in Texas, Missouri, Indiana, among others, to try and get as much advantage as they can going into the midterm elections. This would be, we'll have to see. This is obviously there's supermajorities that are needed by both chambers in Kansas. Could be a heavy lift. The state legislature wasn't willing to draw out Davids ahead of 2022, although it did not have the White House pressure at that time, and the margin for error is small. Alley writes Republicans can lose only a handful of votes in each chamber. And there are moderate Republicans in the Kansas legislature, especially those representing the suburbs in Johnson and other counties. Those lawmakers made Blanchett a request to blow up their state's congressional map for partisan gain. One last thing to keep in mind here is the Kansas court system. A new map is certain to attract a legal challenge, and the state courts may not rule in favor of the GOP. 5 of the 7 justices on the Kansas Supreme Court were appointed by Democratic governors. All right, let's run to the number 3 story of the morning. A really interesting item here on the ad wars in the fallout of the One Big Beautiful bill. Republicans, of course, have been trying to retool how they're talking about that, calling it the Working Families Tax Cut, no longer the One Big Beautiful bill. And now some news: American Action Network, the Congressional Leadership Fund aligned group, is launching a $3.2 million digital ad buy, boosting vulnerable House Republicans for backing the GOP reconciliation package. The ad buy also slams Democratic frontliners for opposing the bill. Here's the pro-GOP argument the spots running in Republican districts. Like this ad, supporting Representative Ryan McKenzie in Pennsylvania, focus on the tax policies of the GOP package. A homicide detective thanks McKenzie for voting to cut taxes on overtime pay and kick criminal illegals off Medicaid. End quote. It's interesting to see the GOP ad leaning into Medicaid reform as Democrats spent months slamming Republicans for health care cuts. On the anti-Democratic side, in one spot targeting Representative Susie Lee, the Democrat from Nevada, a waitress lambasted Lee for voting no on the reconciliation package. The waitress says Susie Lee could have stopped taxing tips, but she voted no. She'd rather use that money to keep illegals on Medicaid. There are 25 districts targeted in the AAN ad buy, and we have all of them linked in our morning newsletter, so check that out. We're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate it. If you like the Daily Punch, share it on social media, tell your friends, and of course, you can go deeper on all these issues and more by signing up for our free morning newsletter at punchbowl.news. Have a great day and stay safe, everybody.